Well, what we hear in the gospel today is the Beatitudes of Jesus. Is one of the most beautiful teachings of Jesus. We have to learn a lot from the Beatitudes because when we put in practice the Beatitudes, we become more like Jesus is. The Beatitudes is not something that Jesus invented, but we hear the word blessed in different passages in the Old Testament, but also some other writers like Homer on the Odyssey. He talks about blessed is the man who has a good wife. So he was using that language even before Jesus. But Jesus also used the language from the Old Testament. We find one of the blessings that we find in the Old Testament is in the Psalm number 1. Blessed is the man who doesn't follow the way of the wicked. So we see the Beatitude there, and we see Beatitudes in the Old Testament 44 times. So Jesus is using the language that he heard before. And when we hear of someone being blessed, we usually relate it in worldly ways. Sometimes we have the expression like, oh, how a lucky man, look at the house that he has. Or how a lucky man, he's good looking, or she's good looking. Or how a lucky family, they get to travel. You know? And sometimes it's like we say, blessed are they because they have all these good things. But the problem is that sometimes we just stay on the material things, and that's what we look at. Because that's what we perceive, we can see, we can touch. And that's why it's very easy to get distracted by what is surrounding us. I think the question that we are to ask here, because beatitude means a compliment. So the question that we are to ask ourselves, do we want to be complimented by human beings, or at the end of our life to be complimented by Jesus? And if we want to be complimented by human beings, we might have to do the contrary of what we hear in the gospel today, the Beatitudes. But if we want to be complimented to Jesus at the end of our life, we are to listen to the Beatitudes, to what the Lord Jesus has to say. Now, we are in the world, and this is like the valley, the plain. And when we are in the world, there are many distractions, many things that attract us. We see many things surrounding us. We want to buy, to possess, to have. And we are distracted. We live in a distracted society today. But also, we have to take some time to go up the mountain to be able to listen to what the Lord has to say. There are many voices in our society are calling us to buy, to possess, to have all these things. But sometimes we have to leave the valley, the plain, and go up to the mountain to listen to the Lord. And that's what we see. Like even in the Greek mythology, we see that the gods were on the Olympics, up there, you know. Then we see Moses, he went up to the mountain to have an encounter with God. Elisha, the prophet, he went to the mountain. And then we see Jesus very often taking his disciples on the mountain to pray, or the transfiguration, or when he was taken up to heaven, he take his disciples to a mountain. So the mountain is where we encounter God. And by that doesn't mean that we have to go climb the mountain, but it means that we have to get out of what the voices of the society, of what we see, what we can touch, what we can perceive. And we have to be by ourselves and just do some thinking, reflection, prayer. Because that's when we learn how to listen to the voice of the Lord. All of us, something that is written in our hearts is silence. Something that is written in our hearts is that we want to be happy. And that's the meaning of sin. In the Hebrew, sin, the word sin means missing the target. That's the meaning of that. So In other words, when we sin, it's not because we want to do evil, but because we think that what we are doing is making us happy. And that's why we can be distracted in many ways. We miss the target. And Jesus is telling us in the Beatitudes, what is the target? What is it that is going to make us happy, fulfilled? And that's the spirit of the Beatitudes. So the very first Beatitude, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And we say, well, being poor is not a good thing, because then you might be missing a meal, not to have enough to eat. So is this the poor that Jesus is referring to? Or the ones who have lost everything in a tragedy, by a flooding or by a fire or by earthquake, that they have lost everything? No, these are not the poor that Jesus is referring to. Jesus is referring to the ones who have become poor, who live a simple life because they have shared what they have. And that's not something that happens just like this, that God is going to ask you to leave everything at once. Sometimes He does. But usually, He's asking you to be given little by little. So when you come to the moment of death, the moment of death is like when you go through customs. You have to bring all your belongings, and there are things that you are allowed to take, and some things that you are not allowed to take. And what you're allowed to take, the good works. Anything else, you have to leave it there. At the moment of death. So that's why it's important that we share what we have, especially with those who are in greater need. And Jesus is the one who has given us the example, because He is the one who was rich and became poor. One of us, a human being like us. And then not only that, but He served all His life, and then He gave His life, everything that He had, even His life, for the salvation of us. So He gave everything that He had. So we have to imitate Jesus in doing the same, helping other people, being there for other people. So that's the first beatitude. And then we hear, blessed are the ones who mourn. And we say, well, the ones who suffer, and we might see it as a tragedy. So what Jesus means is what He did Himself. You remember when Jesus was it was a little hill, and He was contemplating the city of Jerusalem. And then He started weeping. And He started weeping because the people that He loved didn't receive His message, and they didn't receive Him as the Messiah. The people that were chosen by God rejected Jesus. And that's why Jesus is weeping for His people. So that's the kind of mourning that Jesus is talking about. Whenever we see evil, injustice in the world, sometimes we are moved with compassion and we cry, we weep for other people. Because He hurt us to see other people suffering. And then we try to help them to do something about it. And then the other beatitude that we see, the next one that we see today, blessed are the meek. Sometimes when we talk about the meek, we may say, well, these people are very peaceful, they don't, very quiet, very calm. Well, that's not the meekness that Jesus is talking about. The ones who are meek are the ones who do not let themselves be driven by anger, because that's the opposite of meekness. And sometimes we experience some anger, especially when we see the evil in the world. Like what happened in California, the shootings, that make us angry. Or when we see the war that we see, people suffering because of the war, and it makes us very angry and upset. Well, it's okay to be angry at some extent, Now, Jesus even expelled the sellers in the temple. That was the anger out of the zeal for the house of his Father. That was a holy place, so that's why he did that. But sometimes if we allowed ourselves to be very angry, we can do evil as well. And that's what Jesus is referring to. That's why we are not to be that angry. Be at some extent, but not to harm other people, because when we harm other people, we get disfigured. We disfigure the face of God in us to other people. That's why we are to always love. And then Jesus continued, and he tells his disciples, Blessed are the ones who hunger and thirst for righteousness. A longing for righteousness. All of us, we want to see a better world. That's what is in our hearts. We want to see the injustice to come to an end. We want to see goodness in people. And that's something that we can build. Before, in another time, we know that the way that justice was taking place was by the guillotine, by beheading people. That's the way that they were doing justice. And the guillotine was called the wooden of justice. Or when a judge, I was seeing this the news, and I remember a long time ago, and the judge he signed up the death penalty of this man, and then after that he was put to death. Right after that, and then he said, "Today we have make justice." That's not the justice that Jesus is talking about. What can change the world is to love other people, unconditional love. And that's what Jesus is referring to. Yes, we are to change the world. And the way that we can change the heart, the evil heart, is by doing good to them, not responding in the same way. Then it can change the hearts of the others if we forgive them, if we give them another opportunity. Because God has the power to change hearts, especially love. And then, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Who are the merciful? There were rabbis, they were debating if God was merciful or God was just. He cannot be both. He had to be only one. That's what they were saying. So God is just, or is he merciful? But if God was just, probably will end all of us in hell. If God was just, he was treating us according to the wrong that we do. So God is merciful before being just. So that's who God is. So he's always ready to forgive us. Mercy is usually from someone who is here to someone who is here. So we can say that God bends to listen to us, to help us, to bless us. He bends to forgive us. That's what God does. And that's the face that we are to bring to other people. There are three conditions for mercy. The first one is that we are to be able to see when there is a need. To see who is in need. And then the second one is that we are to feel what they're experiencing, what they're feeling. So we relate to their suffering. And then the third one, we do something about it. We cannot ignore it. So we respond doing something good. And the least thing that we can do is to pray. But we are to do always something good for other people. Blessed are the clean of heart. The clean of hearts, the one who has clean of heart is the one who listens to the Lord, to what He has to say. Then listen to the Lord by doing good to other people. try to do what God asks of us. Those are the clean of heart. And those whose hearts have been polluted, the hearts that are not clean, are the ones that are driven by the ways of the world. So sometimes when someone is driven by money, can do evil to get money. Or when someone is driven by anger, can do evil to other people. So what is it that is driving us, Or when someone is driven by pleasures. So, and when the heart is polluted, it's very hard to find God. So sometimes people says, well, I really want to find God, but I don't want to live the ways of the world. And when that happens, it's very hard to find God. Because when we are filled with many things, how can God enter into our hearts? So first we have to detach little by little, and then God can take room in us and be part of us. So God can do that work in us. He can change us, transform us. But we need to look for Him. And then, blessed are the peacemakers. That's something that we long. That's what we want to see in the world today. Today that we see the danger of war, the violence that we see, we long for peace. And peace will come, and the shalom of Jesus will come when everyone has what they need to live. And that's something that we can build. Now, helping other people, restoring their dignity, helping them. And that's the way that we can transform the society, that peace can start in the world. We all can do something, even if it is small. We can do always something. And then the last two Beatitudes, blessed are you when they persecute you for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of evil against you falsely because of me. And we say, how can we be blessed if somebody is persecuting us or is saying something false against us? The first reaction is to react against them. But Jesus is telling us that we are blessed because that's the sign. If they persecute you, and they utter all kind of evil against you, that's the sign that you are on the side of God, that you are doing the right thing, that God is with you. And if you are on the side of God and God is with you, you are not to fear anything. You are secure, even if the whole world is against you. That's the side that we're invited to. So we ask the Lord today to give us a good heart, a heart that is always moved like the heart of God, with mercy, with compassion, that we may build peace, that we may fulfill all these beatitudes. In other words, that we can love unconditionally, because love is what can change the world. May the Lord give us that grace. Amen.